Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. Winter, 1916. Snow falls on Indiana limestone. 110 rooms stand in darkness behind bronze doors that weigh more than a man. Marble from 6 countries lines the halls. In the galleries, Rembrandts and Raphaels watch empty corridors. Outside, French fountains, sculpted by masters whose work graces European palaces, have gone silent for the season. The house is Lynnewood Hall, 4 acres under one roof. Built in just 2 years with materials that can never be replicated. The finest private art collection in America hangs on its walls. But stand in the main hall and listen. The silence isn't peaceful. It's the silence that comes after loss, after the unsinkable ship sank, after a father buried his son and grandson in the same week, after a fortune discovered that no amount of money can buy back what the Atlantic takes. This isn't a ghost story, though some say Lynnewood is haunted. This is about something more concrete, more calculable, and infinitely more costly. What happens when the American dream builds a palace and tragedy moves in? Beauty can make you immortal, but what if immortality is the curse? The real question isn't whether Lynnewood Hall is cursed. The question is simpler, crueler, and more American. Who actually paid for paradise, and what did it cost them? If you love deep investigations into Gilded Age architecture and the families who built America's grandest houses, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which mansion we should explore next. Your support makes these detailed stories possible. Thank you for being here. Let's begin.
December 19th, 1899. The carriages arrive after dark. Gas lamps, soon to be replaced by electricity, flicker along the approach. Beyond iron gates, past newly planted trees that will take decades to mature, a house rises that refuses the word house. Lynnewood Hall. It emerges from 33 acres of Pennsylvania countryside like a French chateau transported stone by stone across the Atlantic. Indiana limestone, chosen for its ability to hold carved detail for centuries. Steel I-beams, the latest structural technology, hidden inside load-bearing walls. A facade that balances Georgian restraint with Beaux-Arts grandeur. The numbers tell part of the story. 110 rooms, 55,000 square feet, 3 stories above ground, ballroom with 30-foot ceilings, main hall clad in cane stone from France, bronze doors cast in Florence, marble from Italy, Belgium, and Vermont, light fixtures from E.F. Caldwell, the premier atelier of the age, a Louis Comfort Tiffany skylight crowning the tea room. But numbers don't deliver the sensation. Step through those bronze doors on opening night, December 19th, 1899. The main hall rises before you. Stone, marble, carved wood paneling imported from French chateaus. Look up, plasterwork that took Italian craftsmen months to complete. Look left, the grand staircase, wide enough for 6 people to descend abreast. Balustrades carved with a precision that announces this is not decoration, but statement. Every detail was deliberate. The carved wood came from Versailles. The tapestries once hung in the homes of European aristocrats, purchased through the Duveen brothers, the most prominent art dealers of the era. Furniture tagged from French palaces, Florentine bronze, walls that would hold paintings by Rembrandt, Raphael, Titian, El Greco, masters whose work belonged in museums, not private homes. Except this was a private home. The man who built it didn't inherit this fortune. He started with nothing. Peter Arell Brown Widener, born November 13, 1834 in Philadelphia, was the son of a bricklayer. He began his working life at 13 in a mutton shop, learning the butcher's trade. By 16, he owned his own shop. By 30, he'd moved into city contracts, supplying meat to Union troops during the Civil War, a business that required not just skill, but ruthless logistics and political connections. Then came the leap: streetcars. Philadelphia in the 70s and 80s was expanding. Transportation meant power. Widener saw it early. He partnered with William Elkins, his future in-law, and together they built a transit empire, streetcar lines eventually electrified that webbed across Philadelphia and radiated into other cities. Then came utilities, then traction companies in New York, Chicago, Baltimore. The wealth accumulated wasn't modest, it was staggering. By the 1890s, Peter Widener ranked among America's richest men. He sat on corporate boards with J.P. Morgan. He held shares in railroads, utilities, and the International Mercantile Company, which would later own the White Star Line. The White Star Line. Remember that name. But wealth for Widener wasn't purely accumulation. Like many Gilded Age magnates, he believed in civic duty. Not out of sentimentality, though he had that too, from a philosophy that privilege demanded responsibility. If society made you rich, you owed society back. He would fund schools, charities, libraries. He would open his home, this home, to the public for most of the year so ordinary citizens could view the art he collected, not as owner, but as caretaker. Art belongs to those who appreciate it. Others merely own it, his son Joseph would later say. Lynnewood Hall was built on that principle. A private treasure house, yes, but one meant to serve, to educate, to give back. The architect was Horace Trumbauer, only 29 years old when Peter Widener approached him in 1997. Trumbauer had already designed Gray Towers in Glenside, a commission for industrialist William Harrison that announced a young genius at work. Widener saw the plans and knew this man would design his country estate. Trumbauer didn't disappoint. His plans for Lynnewood Hall married European tradition to American engineering. French chateau proportions, steep roofs, corner pavilions, symmetry, executed in materials built to outlast generations. Indiana limestone and steel, brick, marble, concrete of the highest quality. Construction methods so sound that over a century later, despite decades of neglect, the structure endures. Work began in the fall of 1897. 2 years, that was the timeline. An impossible schedule for a house of this scale, but Widener had resources and Trumbauer had systems. Materials arrived from across the globe. Limestone from Indiana quarries, shipped by rail. Marble from Europe, offloaded at Philadelphia docks. Bronze castings from Italy. Carved wood panels disassembled in France, crated and reassembled in Pennsylvania by craftsmen who crossed the ocean for the job. The workforce was massive. Hundreds of men, stonemasons, carpenters, plasterers, glazers, electricians, still a new trade in 1897. The house would have electricity throughout, a rarity. Also central heating, another luxury. Indoor plumbing in every bathroom, over a dozen in all. Innovations that required engineers on site, solving problems in real time. The grounds demanded equal attention. William Kleinheinz, the head gardener, laid out the original landscape. Lawns, ornamental plantings, carriage paths. Later, in 1916, the French landscape architect Jacques Graber, who would also design the Benjamin Franklin Parkway in Philadelphia, would redesign the gardens in the formal French style, with fountains sculpted by his father, Henri Léon Graber, one of Europe's most celebrated artists. By December 1899, it was ready. Opening night was invitation only. Philadelphia society arrived in evening dress. The house glowed with electric light, still novel enough to draw gasps. Music played, champagne flowed. Guests moved through the galleries, studying paintings that would make curators weep. Cellini, Gainsworth, Reynolds, Degas, Franz Hals, Velázquez. For one night, the dream felt whole. What guests didn't see, what they couldn't see, was the cost beneath the beauty. Not just financial cost, though that was immense. estimated at several $1 million, over $100 million in today's terms, just for construction. Add furnishings, art, and landscaping, and the figure climbs beyond calculation. But there was another cost, a human cost, a cost measured not in dollars, but in hours, in sweat, in risk. The men who built Lynnewood Hall worked 6-day-a-weeks, 10-hour days. Stonemasons earned more than laborers, skill commanded premium, but even skilled work was punishing. Stone dust filled lungs, heights were unforgiving, winter bit hard. Some workers lived on site in temporary housing, others walked miles from Philadelphia each morning. For 2 years, this was their world, a palace rising stone by stone, and they were the invisible hands making it real. When the house opened, they scattered, on to the next job, their names recorded in payroll ledgers, archived and mostly forgotten. The house endured. The men who built it did not receive invitations to the gala. Peter Widener stood in his new home that December night and felt perhaps satisfaction. He had built something extraordinary, a place for his art, a place for his family, his wife Josephine, his sons George and Joseph, his grandchildren, a place that would, he hoped, outlast him. He couldn't have known what was coming. April 14th, 1912, just 13 years away. The night that would crack Lynnewood Hall's foundation more thoroughly than any earthquake.
To understand what Lynnewood Hall represents, you have to understand the man who built it. Peter Errol Brown Widener was not born to privilege. November 13, 1834, Philadelphia. His father was a bricklayer, solid trade, modest income, no inheritance. Peter grew up understanding that wealth wasn't given, it was taken, earned, or built from nothing. At 13, he left school and went to work, a mutton shop. Butchering wasn't glamorous, but it taught lessons that would serve him for life. Logistics, supply chains, inventory management, customer relations, how to buy cheap, sell fair, and still turn profit. By 16, he owned his own shop. Think about that. 16 years old. Most boys that age were apprentices. Peter was an owner. The Civil War changed everything. When conflict erupted in 1861, Philadelphia became a supply hub for Union forces. Troops needed food, meat specifically. The contracts were enormous, the logistics nightmarish, the potential profit staggering if you could deliver. Peter could deliver. He secured government contracts to supply mutton to Union soldiers. The work required not just butchering skill, but organizational genius, sourcing livestock, managing slaughter, ensuring freshness, coordinating transport to camps and battlefields. Failure meant lost contracts, lost reputation, possibly prosecution. Peter didn't fail. The war made him wealthy, not Vanderbilt wealthy, not yet, but comfortable, secure, and more importantly, connected. War contracts required political relationships. Peter built them. He learned how city government worked, where power concentrated, who held influence. Philadelphia in the 1960s and 70s was a machine, literally a political machine, and Peter learned to operate it. After the war, he saw the next opportunity, transportation. Philadelphia was growing. The city sprawled outward. Workers needed to reach jobs. Residents needed to reach markets, churches, entertainment. Horses and walking weren't enough. Streetcars were the answer. Peter partnered with William Lukens Elkins, a businessman whose daughter Eleanor would later marry Peter's son George. Together, they built a streetcar empire. Philadelphia Traction Company, that was the start. Then acquisitions, competing lines purchased or squeezed out, routes expanded, service improved, fare stayed low enough to build ridership, high enough to generate profit. Then came electrification. In the 1880s, electric streetcars replaced horse-drawn cars, faster, cleaner, more reliable. Widener and Elkins invested heavily in the technology. Their lines modernized first, gaining competitive advantage. Ridership soared.
They didn't stop at Philadelphia. The model worked. They exported it. New York, Chicago, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, streetcar companies in city after city, all following the Widener-Elkins playbook: acquire, consolidate, electrify, dominate. Then utilities, electric companies to power the streetcars, gas companies for lighting. The infrastructure that cities needed, Widener provided, for a price. By the 1890s, Peter Widener was one of the wealthiest men in America. His fortune came from transit, but also from shrewd investment. He sat on corporate boards with the era's titans, J.P. Morgan, Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller. He held shares in railroads, steel mills, banks, and one particularly fateful company, the International Mercantile Marine Company, a shipping trust assembled by Morgan that owned, among other lines, the White Star Line. The White Star Line operated a fleet of passenger ships crossing the Atlantic, luxurious vessels that carried immigrants to America and wealthy Americans to Europe. Among those ships, RMS Titanic. Peter Widener was a major shareholder. His son George served on the board. But we're getting ahead of the story. In the 1990s, the Titanic hadn't been built yet. The future still felt secure. Peter had wealth, power, and a growing art collection. That collection deserves its own chapter, but here's the foundation. Peter didn't collect art for status. He collected because he believed in it. Beauty, he felt, was a public good. Great art belonged to everyone, even if temporarily housed in private hands. He and his son Joseph traveled to Europe regularly: London, Paris, Rome, Vienna. They visited galleries, auction houses, aristocratic estates. They worked with the Devine brothers, art dealers who sourced masterpieces from financially struggling European nobility, and they bought aggressively. Rembrandt, Raphael, Titian, Velázquez, El Greco, Bellini, Donatello, Van Dyck, Gainsborough, Reynolds, Monet, Degas, Sargent. These weren't prints or copies. These were the originals, museum-quality works, many of which today hang in the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., because Peter and Joseph always intended to give them back. More on that later. By the mid-1990s, Peter had wealth, power, and influence, and a problem: where to keep it all. He owned a townhouse in Philadelphia, elegant, well-located, but too small for the art collection, too public for the privacy he increasingly craved. Newport was an option. His social circle summered there, but Newport was spectacle. Peter wanted something else. He wanted a country estate, a place large enough to house his family, display his art, and entertain selectively. A place that announced his arrival among America's elite but didn't scream for attention. He wanted what European aristocrats had, a house that felt permanent. In 1897, he approached Horace Trumbauer. Trumbauer was 29 years old. Precocious doesn't cover it. The man was a prodigy, self-taught, never attended architecture school, but possessed an intuitive grasp of proportion, structure, and style that left formally trained architects scrambling to keep up. Peter had seen his work at Gray Towers in Glenside, designed for industrialist William Harrison. The house was magnificent, a Gothic revival chateau executed with precision and grandeur. Peter knew immediately this was his architect. Trumbauer accepted the commission. The site was Elkins Park, a suburb north of Philadelphia. Rolling countryside, 33 acres of open land, close enough to the city for convenience, far enough for privacy. The neighborhood, if you could call it that, was exclusive. Only the wealthiest built there. Eventually, 5 Trumbauer-designed mansions would stand in Elkins Park. Lynnewood Hall would be the largest. Peter's instructions were clear. Build the finest house in America. Spare no expense. Use materials that will last centuries. Design spaces to showcase art. Include modern systems, electricity, central heating, plumbing. Make it comfortable, not just grand. And make it fast. 2 years. Trumbauer delivered. Construction began in fall 1897. The site was cleared, foundations dug, steel I-beams ordered. Indiana limestone arrived by the trainload. Marble from 6 countries, Italy, Belgium, France, Vermont, Tennessee, and more, was shipped to Pennsylvania. Craftsmen were hired, Italian stonemasons, German carpenters, French plasterers. The house rose methodically. First the steel skeleton, then the limestone skin. Walls climbed course by course. The roof went on, slate, durable and elegant. Windows were glazed, hundreds of panes. Interior work began, plaster, woodwork, tile, fixtures. Trumbauer supervised obsessively. Every detail mattered. The Florentine bronze doors had to align perfectly. The cane stone in the main hall required careful setting to achieve seamless appearance. The carved wood panels from France had to be reassembled exactly as they'd been disassembled. Quality was non-negotiable. Peter had money, but more importantly, he had standards. He didn't want flashy, he wanted lasting. By late 1899, it was ready. 110 rooms, 55,000 square feet, ballroom, galleries, library, billiard room, conservatory, tea room with Tiffany skylight, over a dozen bathrooms, servants' quarters, service corridors, state-of-the-art kitchen. Cost? Exact figures are elusive, but estimates suggest several $1,000,000, north of $100 million today, and that's before furnishings and art. December 19, 1899, the grand opening. Invitations sent to Philadelphia's elite. The house glowed with electric light. Guests toured the galleries, marveling at paintings worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. Peter Widener stood in his main hall and looked around. He had done it. A butcher's son had built a palace. The American dream realized in limestone and marble. He believed it would stand forever, a monument to what ambition and discipline could achieve. He was right about the house. Lynnewood Hall still stands. But the dream? That had an expiration date. April 14th, 1912. 13 years away, and closing fast. Building Lynnewood Hall wasn't construction, it was orchestration. Fall 1897. Horace Trumbauer stood on 33 acres of Pennsylvania countryside and drew the first lines. Not metaphorically, literally. Stakes in the ground, survey strings, the footprint of a house that would cover more ground than most people would walk in a day. 110 rooms, 55,000 square feet, 3 stories above ground, full basement below. A ballroom with 30-foot ceilings, galleries to hold hundreds of paintings, a grand staircase wide enough for a wedding procession. And Peter Widener wanted it finished in 2 years. Impossible? Not if you had Widener's resources and Trumbauer's discipline. The first challenge? Materials. Trumbauer specified Indiana limestone for the exterior. Dense, weather-resistant, capable of holding carved detail for centuries. Quarries in southern Indiana cut the stone to order, each block numbered to match Trumbauer's drawings. Shipped by rail to Philadelphia, then hauled by wagon to Elkins Park. Tons of stone, arriving weekly, sometimes daily. Stonemasons, many from Italy, trained in old-world techniques, set each block with precision. Mortar mixed on site, joints tight, lines true. The facade rose course by course, anchored to a steel skeleton hidden inside the walls. Steel was the secret. I-beams, a relatively new technology in residential construction, carried the structural load. This allowed walls to be thinner, rooms to be larger, openings to be wider. Trumbauer understood engineering as well as aesthetics. The house looked traditional, but was built modern. Inside the limestone shell, other crews threaded systems that made Lynnewood Hall more than a showpiece. It was a machine. Electricity. In 1897, electric lighting in homes was rare, especially outside major cities. Most people still used gas or oil lamps. Lynnewood would have electric light throughout. Wiring had to be pulled before plaster went up. Standards were inconsistent. The electrical code was still evolving, so engineers designed a bespoke system with redundancies and safety margins. A generator in a separate building supplied power, reducing fire risk. Major rooms received multiple circuits. Switches were installed in logical locations. Call buttons connected bedrooms to servants' quarters. Even the chandeliers, custom made by E.F. Caldwell & Co., were wired for electric bulbs. Central heating. Massive boilers in the basement burned coal to generate hot water, circulated through miles of pipe to radiators in every room. Insulation, pressure regulation, and constant tending were essential. Engineers had to be on staff year-round. Comfort carried a standing price. Steady fuel, steady oversight, steady expense. Plumbing. Indoor bathrooms were luxuries in 1897, especially in rural areas. Lynnewood Hall would have over a dozen. Porcelain fixtures, tile floors and walls, hot and cold running water. Pipes had to be laid carefully to avoid freezes in winter, leaks in summer. Drainage had to flow correctly. Water pressure had to be consistent. Then came the finishes. The main hall was clad in cane stone, a creamy French limestone prized for its smooth texture, and multiple types of marble: Italian Carrara, Belgian black, Vermont verde. Walls rose to a height that required scaffolding. Craftsmen worked for months achieving seamless joints. The grand staircase, carved balustrades, treads wide and shallow for graceful ascent, risers clad in marble. The staircase wasn't just functional, it was theater, designed so guests could make entrances. Carved wood paneling throughout, imported from French chateaux, disassembled, crated, shipped across the Atlantic, and reassembled by French craftsmen who crossed with it. Some panels came from Versailles. Tagged furniture, pieces with provenance traceable to French palaces, were integrated into rooms. Tapestries, purchased through the Devine brothers from European aristocrats, selling off ancestral collections to cover debts. These weren't decorative throws, these were museum-grade textiles, centuries old, woven by masters. The ballroom, 30-foot ceilings, chandeliers weighing hundreds of pounds, floor inlaid with hardwoods and geometric patterns, walls covered with silk damask. The room was designed to hold 100 people comfortably and impress them thoroughly. The library, floor-to-ceiling shelves, rolling ladders, a fireplace with carved surround, seating for quiet reading. Peter loved books almost as much as art. This room was for him. The galleries, 2 large spaces designed specifically to display paintings. Lighting was critical, too harsh and colors distorted, too dim and details disappeared. Trumbauer installed skylights with diffusing glass and supplemental electric fixtures. Walls were covered with fabric chosen to complement, not compete with the art. The tea room, crowned by a Louis Comfort Tiffany skylight. Tiffany glass, even then, was prized for its color and luminosity. The skylight filtered natural light into shifting hues throughout the day. The room became a jewel box. The conservatory, a glass-roofed space for tropical plants, heated in winter, ventilated in summer. A luxury borrowed from English country houses, a room where nature could be controlled, displayed, and enjoyed year-round. Bedrooms. Peter and Josephine had a suite. George and Eleanor would have theirs. Guest rooms for visitors, each with private bathroom, custom furnishings, views of the grounds. Servants' quarters. Lynnewood Hall required staff, lots of staff, maids, footmen, cooks, laundresses, butlers, valets, ladies' maids, groundskeepers, stable hands, chauffeurs. Housing was provided on the upper floors and in ancillary buildings, not luxurious but decent. better than many servants enjoyed elsewhere. Service corridors and back staircases allowed staff to move unseen. The goal was seamless operation. Fires lit before dawn, meals prepared on time, rooms cleaned without disturbing occupants. Guests should never see the machinery that made comfort possible. By summer 1999, the shell was complete. Roof on, walls tight, windows glazed. Interior work accelerated. Plasterers closed walls, painters applied coat after coat, electricians tested circuits, plumbers pressure-tested lines, tile setters finished bathrooms, carpenters installed paneling, doors and built-ins. Furniture arrived, art was uncrated, books filled shelves, rugs were laid, chandeliers were hoisted and wired, fireplaces were tested. The kitchen, industrial scale, designed to feed family and staff, was outfitted with the latest equipment. Outside, landscaping advanced. William Kleinheinz, the head gardener, planted trees, shrubs, ornamental beds. Lawns were seeded and rolled smooth. Carriage paths were graded and surfaced. The grounds were designed to complement the house, formal near the building, gradually transitioning to naturalistic as you moved outward. December 1999, final inspections. Trumbauer walked every room, checked every detail. Anything substandard was corrected. No shortcuts. Peter Widener didn't pay for good enough. December 19, 1999, grand opening. The house was ready. What guests saw that night was the result of 2 years of relentless labor. Hundreds of men, stonemasons, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, plasterers, painters, glazers, landscapers, worked 6-day weeks, 10-hour days. Some lived on site, others walked miles from Philadelphia. The human cost is hard to quantify. No OSHA in 1897, no safety regulations. Heights were dangerous. Tools were primitive by modern standards. Stone dust damaged lungs. Injuries were common. Some men didn't finish the job, illness, accident, or simply moving to better-paying work. Their names are in payroll ledgers, archived, mostly forgotten. The house remembers them in its bones. Every stone they set, every beam they raised, every pipe they soldered. Peter Widener walked through Lynnewood Hall that December night and saw perfection. Horace Trumbauer saw his reputation secured. Guests saw wealth made visible. No one saw the invisible hands that built it. But without those hands, Lynnewood Hall doesn't exist. Beauty requires labor. Always has, always will. The question we keep circling, who pays? The workers paid in sweat and risk. Peter paid in dollars, millions of them. But the real payment, the one that couldn't be calculated in ledgers? That bill hadn't arrived yet. It was steaming to New York Harbor, due April 19th.
Walk into Lynnewood Hall on any given day between 1900 and 1943, and you're not just in a home. You're in one of the finest art galleries in America. The walls held masterpieces, not replicas, not prints, originals. Rembrandt, Raphael, Titian, Velázquez, El Greco, Vermeer, Franz Hals, Gainsborough, Reynolds, Bellini, Donatello, Monet, Degas, Corot, Van Dyck, Sargent. Over 2,000 works in total. Paintings, sculpture, furniture, tapestries, ceramics, metalwork. A collection curated with obsessive care over decades by Peter A.B. Widener and his son, Joseph Early Widener. This wasn't accumulation for status. This was connoisseurship. Peter began collecting in the 1880s, relatively late compared to some Gilded Age magnates, but he came to it seriously. He studied, he traveled, he sought expertise. His primary guides were the Duveen brothers, Joseph, Henry, and later Joseph's son, also named Joseph. The Duveens were the most powerful art dealers of their era. They operated globally, with galleries in London, Paris, and New York. Their specialty,
sourcing masterworks from European aristocrats who were, increasingly, broke. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were hard on European nobility: agricultural depressions, rising taxes, crumbling estates. Families that had held art for generations found themselves asset-rich and cash-poor. The solution? Sell the Rembrandt, keep the title. American industrialists were happy to buy. The Duvines brokered these transactions brilliantly. They authenticated, restored, and marketed works to American collectors who wanted not just art, but pedigree. And no one bought with more purpose than the Wideners. Peter's philosophy was clear. He wasn't buying decoration, he was buying history. Each painting was a window into another time, each sculpture a tangible connection to human genius. He believed great art belonged to civilization, not individuals. His son Joseph shared this view, perhaps even more intensely. Joseph Early Widener was born in 1771, educated, refined, and deeply knowledgeable about art history. Where Peter collected broadly, Joseph collected with precision. He knew provenance, he could spot a fake, he understood conservation. Together, they built the collection. Start with the paintings. Rembrandt's The Mill hung in Lynnewood Hall. A landscape, moody and atmospheric, the kind of work that changes with the light. Rembrandt painted emotion into landscape, no small feat, and this piece demonstrated his mastery. Raphael's The Small Cowper Madonna, Renaissance perfection. The Madonna serene, the Christ child alert, composition balanced with mathematical precision. Raphael was 22 when he painted it, a prodigy capturing divinity on wood panel. Titian's portraits, rich color, psychological depth. Titian painted power, princes, popes, merchants, and made them human. Velázquez, Spanish court painter. His works at Lynnewood Hall included portraits and religious scenes, executed with brushwork so confident it looks effortless. It wasn't. El Greco's elongated figures, spiritual intensity radiating from canvas. Not everyone liked El Greco in the early 1900s. The Wideners did. They recognized genius before the broader art world caught up. Vermeer. Only about 34 Vermeers exist worldwide. The Wideners owned one, a lady writing. Quiet, luminous, intimate. Vermeer painted light like no one else. Windows, reflections, fabric catching sun. His technique remains partially mysterious even today. Frans Hals, Dutch portraiture at its liveliest. Hals captured personality, laughter, skepticism, swagger. His brushwork was loose, almost modern. Critics later compared him to Impressionists, though he worked 200 years earlier. Gainsborough and Reynolds, English portraiture. Aristocrats in silk and satin, landscapes behind them, elegant, formal, impeccably crafted. Then the sculpture. Donatello, the Renaissance master, works in bronze and marble, human figures rendered with anatomical precision and emotional depth. Cellini, Benvenuto Cellini, goldsmith, sculptor, egomaniac, and genius. His works, small bronzes, decorative objects, were prized for technical brilliance. The furniture, tagged pieces from Versailles, chairs, tables, cabinets, with provenance tracing back to the court of Louis XIV, XV, or XVI, not reproductions, originals. Gilded wood, inlaid surfaces, upholstery replaced, but frames authentic. The tapestries, Flemish, French, Italian, woven by master craftsmen in the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries, biblical scenes, mythological narratives, hunting scenes. Each tapestry took years to weave, threads of silk, wool, sometimes gold, colors that, despite centuries, still held richness. The Wideners hung these tapestries on Lynnewood Hall's walls like Europeans did in chateaux. Functional art, insulation, sound dampening, beauty. Ceramics and metalwork, Chinese porcelain, European faience, silver by renowned makers, every object chosen for quality, history, and rarity. By the 1910s, the collection rivaled anything in American museums and surpassed most. Only a handful of private collections could compete: J.P. Morgan's, Henry Clay Frick's, Andrew Mellon's. But the Wideners did something unusual. They shared it. From October through June each year, essentially whenever the family was in residence, Lynnewood Hall opened to the public. Not daily, not uncontrolled, but regularly, by appointment, free of charge. Art students, scholars, collectors, curious citizens. If you wrote ahead and requested a visit, you were likely admitted. Escorted tours through the galleries, time to study the paintings, opportunity to see works that otherwise required travel to Europe. This wasn't common. Most Gilded Age collectors kept their treasures private. The Wideners believed differently. Art belongs to those who appreciate it, said Joseph. Others merely own it. They saw themselves as temporary stewards, caretakers, not owners. Their role was to protect, preserve, and eventually return these works to the public. That intention crystallized after 1912, after tragedy taught them that nothing is permanent. But even before the Titanic, Peter and Joseph were planning ahead. Peter funded civic projects. The Widener Memorial School for Children with Disabilities opened in 1906 in memory of his wife Josephine. Libraries, charities, scholarships. Joseph, quieter, more introspective, focused on the art. He wanted it preserved. He wanted it accessible. In 1937, Congress authorized the creation of the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. Andrew Mellon donated his collection to seed it. Other collectors followed. The gallery opened in 1941. Joseph watched closely. By 1940, Joseph was aging, 70 years old. No children to inherit the collection. His nephew, Peter A.B. Widener, wasn't interested in maintaining Lynnewood Hall as a gallery. The estate was expensive. The art required climate control, security, insurance. The world was at war. The future felt uncertain. Joseph made his decision. Upon his death in 1943, the entire Widener collection, over 2,000 works, would be bequeathed to the National Gallery of Art. All of it. Free and clear. No strings beyond the requirement that the works be displayed together, identified as the Widener collection. It was one of the largest single donations in art history. When Joseph Early Widener died on October 26, 1943, the art left Lynnewood Hall, carefully crated, transported to Washington, unpacked and cataloged. Today, walk through the National Gallery and you'll see them. Rembrandt's The Mill, Raphael's Small Cowper Madonna, Vermeer's A Lady Writing, Titian, Velázquez, El Greco, all bearing the Widener name. The collection Peter and Joseph built now belongs to America. Free admission, open to all, exactly as they intended. Lynnewood Hall lost its art, but gained something else, purpose fulfilled. The house had been a temple for beauty. When beauty left, the temple remained, a shell holding memory. And memory, it turns out, weighs more than marble. But we're still avoiding the question that cracks the foundation. Why did Joseph give it all away in 1943? Why did Lynnewood Hall, once vibrant with art and life, begin its slow fade into abandonment? The answer takes us back to April 1912, back to cold Atlantic water and a ship that couldn't sink, back to the night that took everything.
April 10th, 1912, Southampton, England. 3 people board RMS Titanic: George Dunton Widener, his wife Eleanor Elkins Widener, and their son Harry Elkins Widener. George is Peter's eldest son, 49 years old, confident, prosperous, involved in the family businesses. He serves on corporate boards, including the International Mercantile Marine Company, which, through a web of subsidiaries, owns the White Star Line. Eleanor is the daughter of William Elkins, Peter's longtime business partner. Elegant, well-educated, socially prominent. She and George married in 1883, society wedding,
merger of two Philadelphia fortunes. Harry is their son, 27 years old, graduate of Harvard, bibliophile, book collector, obsessive about rare editions. He owns thousands of volumes, a collection that rivals established libraries. They're in Europe for 3 reasons. First, Harry's books. He's been hunting rare editions in London and Paris. He's found several treasures, including a 2nd edition of Francis Bacon's Essays, 1598, incredibly rare. He's thrilled. Second, Josephine Widener, George and Eleanor's daughter, is getting married. Harry is in Europe to pick up her wedding trousseau, custom-made in Paris. Third, business. George and Eleanor co-own the Ritz-Carlton in Philadelphia. They're in Europe searching for a new chef. French cuisine is the standard. They want the best. By early April, business is done, books are acquired, trousseau is packed. Time to go home. They book passage on Titanic, first class. The ship is brand new, maiden voyage, the largest moving object ever built by humans. 900 feet long, 46,000 tons, luxurious beyond description. Grand staircase, swimming pool, Turkish baths, a la carte restaurant, gymnasium. And famously declared unsinkable. Double-hulled, 16 watertight compartments, designed so that even if 4 compartments flooded, the ship would stay afloat. The engineering seemed flawless. April 10th, Titanic leaves Southampton, stops briefly in Cherbourg, France, then Queenstown, Ireland, then westward across the Atlantic toward New York. George, Eleanor, and Harry settle into their staterooms. First class on Titanic isn't just comfortable, it's palatial. Paddled walls, plush furnishings, ensuite bathrooms. Harry brings his new books. George and Eleanor bring high expectations. On board, approximately 2,200 people, passengers and crew. First class is filled with the wealthy and prominent. John Jacob Astor IV, Benjamin Guggenheim, Molly Brown, Isidore and Ida Strauss, and Captain Edward J. Smith, Titanic's captain, veteran of the White Star Line. This is intended to be his final voyage before retirement, a triumphant capstone to a long career. April 14th, Sunday, 4 days into the voyage. The weather is calm, sea smooth, temperature dropping as the ship steams into an area known for icebergs this time of year. Ice warnings come in by wireless from other ships. Standard, noted, course unchanged. That evening, George and Eleanor Widener host a private dinner party in Titanic's a la carte restaurant. The guest of honor, Captain Smith. This is significant. The Wideners are connected to the ship's ownership through George's position with International Mercantile Marine. Hosting the captain isn't just social, it's political, a gesture of confidence in White Star Line's flagship. The party includes about a dozen guests, fine dining, French wines, conversation about the ship, the voyage, plans upon arrival in New York. Dinner ends around 10 p.m. Guests depart. Captain Smith returns to the bridge. The Wideners retire. Harry goes to his stateroom, probably reads. He always reads before bed. Around 11:40 p.m., the lookout in Titanic's crow's nest spots something ahead. Dark shape, no time to identify. He rings the warning bell 3 times, picks up the telephone to the bridge. Iceberg right ahead. First Officer William Murdoch, commanding the bridge in the captain's absence, orders hard to starboard and engines full astern. The ship begins to turn. Too late. Titanic strikes the iceberg on the starboard side, below the waterline. The impact is glancing, not a head-on collision. To most passengers, it feels like a bump, minor. Some don't wake. But below deck, the iceberg has opened a gash, not continuous, more like a series of punctures. Water pours into the forward compartments. Captain Smith arrives on the bridge within minutes. Thomas Andrews, Titanic's designer, is summoned. He inspects the damage. His assessment is grim. 5 compartments are flooding. The ship was designed to survive 4. The bow will sink, pulling the stern up, and the ship will go down. Time estimate, 1 to 2 hours. It's just past midnight. Orders are given. Uncover the lifeboats, wake the passengers, prepare for evacuation. But there's a problem, a catastrophic problem. Titanic carries lifeboats for about 1,180 people. There are 2,200 aboard. Even if evacuation goes perfectly, which it won't, 1,000 people have no chance. In first class, stewards knock on doors, polite, calm. Please put on your life jackets and come to the boat deck, precautionary measure. George, Eleanor, and Harry dress warmly. It's cold outside, below freezing. They go up to the boat deck. Lifeboats are being lowered, women and children first. Officers enforce the rule, firmly. Eleanor is urged into a lifeboat. She hesitates. She doesn't want to leave George and Harry. George insists, the ship may not sink, but if it does, we'll be fine. There are other boats. There aren't. Not enough. But George believes the ship's officers, who are projecting calm. Eleanor steps into lifeboat number 4. Her lady's maid, Amelia Geiger, joins her. The lifeboat is lowered down the 70 feet from the boat deck to the water. Ropes creak. Women watch the ship's lights recede as they descend. George and Harry remain on deck. The bow is sinking. The stern is rising, slowly at first, then faster. By 2 a.m., the tilt is obvious. People slide. Deck chairs tumble. Panic spreads. Officers fire pistols into the air to control crowds rushing the remaining lifeboats. George and Harry stay together. Reports from survivors say they were last seen on the boat deck, near the grand staircase. 2:25. Titanic's bow is underwater. The stern lifts high out of the sea. The stress is immense. Steel groans. Rivets pop. Then the ship breaks in two. The forward section sinks. The stern, momentarily buoyant, settles back level. Then it tilts vertical, stern up, bow down, and slides beneath the surface. 2:20 a.m. Titanic is gone. The water is 28 degrees Fahrenheit, survivable for minutes, maybe 15, maybe less. 1,500 people are in the water, most wearing life jackets, which keep them afloat but do nothing against the cold. Hypothermia works fast, first shivering, then confusion, loss of coordination, unconsciousness, death. Screams fill the night, hundreds of voices calling for help, calling names, crying. Then, over the next half hour, silence. By 3 a.m., the voices have stopped. In lifeboat number 4, Eleanor Elkins Widener sits wrapped in blankets, staring at the dark water. She has no idea if George or Harry survived. Nearby lifeboats drift. Some are full, some are half empty, launched prematurely, officers fearing panic if they waited to fill them. Around 4 a.m., a ship appears on the horizon, RMS Carpathia, responding to Titanic's distress calls. The little Cunard liner has steamed through iceberg-filled waters at top speed. Carpathia begins picking up lifeboats. Survivors climb rope ladders to the deck. The crew wraps them in blankets, gives them hot drinks, asks for names. Eleanor is brought aboard. She searches faces, asks questions. George? Harry? No one has seen them. As dawn breaks, Carpathia searches the area. Debris floats. Deck chairs, life jackets, luggage, bodies. Some bodies are recovered. Most are left. There aren't enough resources to collect them all. Carpathia takes the survivors to New York, arriving on the evening of April 18th. Crowds wait at the dock. Reporters, family members, cameras flash. Eleanor disembarks, alone. Confirmation comes slowly. Passenger lists are incomplete. Some bodies are recovered later, identified by personal effects. George Dunton Widener, lost. Harry Elkins Widener, lost. Peter A.B. Widener, waiting in Philadelphia, receives the news by telegram.
his eldest son, his grandson, gone. Harry's rare books, including that 1598 Bacon, went down with Titanic, lost forever.
Eleanor survives, but is shattered. She will never fully recover. And Peter, 77 years old, feels something break inside. He walks through Lynnewood Hall, the house he built, the art he collected, the life he constructed, and it all feels hollow. What good is beauty if it can't protect the people you love? What good is wealth if it can't buy back what the ocean takes? Peter A.B. Widener lives 3 more years. He dies on November 6, 1915. Officially, natural causes. Unofficially, a broken heart. Lynnewood Hall survives, but something essential has left. The house is no longer a celebration, it's a mausoleum. And the question that haunts it now, can a house built for joy ever recover from grief?
Philadelphia, April 18, 1912. Peter A.B. Widener sits in the library at Lynnewood Hall. Floor-to-ceiling books, paintings on every wall, light filtering through tall windows. Outside, the French gardens are beginning their spring bloom. He's 77 years old, built an empire from a butcher shop, survived the Civil War, conquered transit, utilities, finance, accumulated one of America's great fortunes. None of it matters. The telegram sits on the desk before him. Western Union, sparse language delivering impossible news. George and Harry lost, stop. Eleanor survived, stop. Returning New York, April 18, stop. Lost, not injured, not missing, lost. The Atlantic doesn't give back what it takes. Peter reads the telegram again and again, as if repetition might change the words. It doesn't. His eldest son, George Dunton Widener, 49 years old, vital, capable, the heir apparent, is gone. His grandson, Harry Elkins Widener, 27, brilliant, a scholar who collected books the way Peter collected art, is gone. Both drowned in water so cold it kills in minutes. Both aboard a ship Peter's company partially owned, a ship declared unsinkable by engineers who believed their hubris. The irony is bitter. Peter holds shares in International Mercantile Marine Company. George served on its board. The Wideners had stake in the White Star Line. In some abstract corporate sense, they owned part of Titanic, and Titanic killed them. Peter stands, walks to the window. The gardens stretch toward the horizon. Trees he planted, lawns maintained by crews he employs. Beyond the gates, the working world continues. Streetcars running on his lines, electric lights burning from his utilities. The machinery of capitalism grinds on, indifferent to personal loss. He turns back to the library. Rembrandt on one wall, Raphael on another. Masterworks that have survived centuries, art that outlasts the people who love it. What good is immortality if you're not alive to see it? The days that follow are mechanical. Peter moves through obligations like an automaton. Notifications must be sent. Funeral arrangements must be made. Eleanor, traumatized and grief-stricken, needs support. Lynnewood Hall fills with mourners. Philadelphia society arrives in black. Quiet conversations, hushed tones. People say the expected things. Tragic, unthinkable, so sorry for your loss. Peter nods, thanks them, says nothing. What is there to say? That his fortune couldn't save them? That all the money in America couldn't buy 2 more lifeboats? The funeral is held at the Widener family plot. George and Harry have no bodies to bury. The ocean keeps those. So the service is symbolic. Markers are placed. Words are spoken. Prayers are offered. Peter stands graveside and feels nothing. Not sadness, not anger, nothing. Grief, he discovers, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's simply absence, the presence of loss. He returns to Lynnewood Hall, and the house feels different. The rooms are the same. The art hasn't moved. The furniture stands where it always stood. But the atmosphere has changed. The house no longer feels like a home. It feels like a museum, a collection of beautiful things that can't feel, can't care, can't die. Peter begins to withdraw. He still manages his business interests, can't let the empire collapse, but his heart isn't in it. Board meetings feel pointless. Profit reports feel obscene. What's the purpose of accumulating more when you can't protect what you love? His health declines, not dramatically, not suddenly, but steadily. Doctors visit. They find nothing specifically wrong. Age, they say, natural decline. Peter knows better. He's dying of grief. He continues opening Lynnewood Hall to the public during the prescribed months. Art students and scholars still tour the galleries. Peter occasionally joins them, walks through his collection, looks at paintings he's looked at 1,000 times. They're still beautiful, still masterful, still worth preserving, but they don't fill the whole. His son, Joseph, the surviving son, younger by a decade, becomes more involved. Joseph understands his father is fading. Someone must steward the estate, the businesses, the art. Joseph is different from George, less outgoing, more contemplative. Where George was a businessman first, Joseph is a curator first. He loves the art even more than Peter does. Father and son have conversations about the future. What happens to Lynnewood Hall when Peter is gone? What happens to the collection? Joseph has ideas. He's been thinking about this for years, and Titanic sharpened his focus. Art belongs to those who appreciate it. Others merely own it. Peter nods. He's heard Joseph say this before. It's become a philosophy, almost a creed. We're caretakers, Joseph continues, not owners. We hold these works for a generation, protect them, share them, then we pass them on. Peter agrees in principle, but to whom and how? Museums are the obvious answer, but which museums and under what terms? They table the discussion. Peter isn't dead yet. There's time. Except there isn't. Peter's health continues to slide. By 1915, 3 years after Titanic, he's noticeably frail. Still sharp mentally, still engaged, but physically diminishing. Doctors recommend rest. Peter ignores them. Rest for what? To live longer in a house that reminds him daily of what he lost? He throws himself into philanthropy. If he can't save his son, maybe he can save someone else. The Widener Memorial School, founded in 1906 for children with disabilities, named for his late wife Josephine, receives additional funding. Other charities benefit: libraries, hospitals, schools. Peter gives away substantial sums, not recklessly, strategically, to institutions that will endure after he's gone. It's his way of imposing order on chaos. Death is random. Legacy can be controlled. November 6, 1915. Peter A.B. Widener dies at Lynnewood Hall, surrounded by family, Joseph at his bedside, Eleanor, George's widow, still living in Philadelphia, present, other relatives. The official cause, natural causes, heart failure, he was 81. The unofficial cause, a broken heart that finally stopped beating. News spreads quickly. Obituaries run in newspapers across America. The Philadelphia Inquirer, the New York Times. Headlines proclaim transit magnate dead, philanthropist Peter Widener dies, art collector leaves vast estate. The obituaries recount his life, butcher's son, Civil War contractor, transit empire, art collector, philanthropist. They mention Titanic, the loss of George and Harry, the tragedy that shadowed his final years. They don't mention that he died in a house filled with beauty that couldn't comfort him. Peter's will is read. The estate is substantial, not Rockefeller level, not Carnegie level, but immense by any standard. Exact figures are private, but estimates suggest tens of millions of dollars, several billion in today's currency. Lynnewood Hall goes to Joseph, along with the art collection, the responsibilities, and the costs. Joseph inherits a palace and a burden. The house demands constant maintenance. Staff must be paid. Taxes must be met. The art requires climate control, security, insurance. Operating costs run into 6 figures annually, over $2 million in today's terms. The estate generates income. Peter's investments were sound, but not infinite income, and the world is changing in ways that make wealth less secure. World War I is raging in Europe. The American economy is volatile. Income taxes, recently introduced, are taking larger bites. The Gilded Age assumption that fortunes are permanent is crumbling. Joseph understands what his father perhaps didn't fully grasp. Lynnewood Hall's survival is not guaranteed. The house can be lost to taxes, poor management, or simple economics. Grand estates have failed before. They'll fail again. Joseph makes a private vow. Lynnewood will not fail on his watch. He begins to plan, carefully, strategically. First, reduce costs. The estate's staff is trimmed. Not drastically. Lynnewood still requires cleaning, grounds maintenance, security, but thoughtfully. Vacant positions aren't always refilled. Departments are consolidated. Second, increase efficiency. Utility use is monitored. Waste is eliminated. Joseph brings the same rigor his father applied to business. Third, protect the art. Climate control is improved. Fire suppression is upgraded. Insurance is maintained even when premiums rise. Fourth, and most importantly, prepare for the inevitable. Joseph knows he won't live forever. He has no children. His nephew, Peter A.B. Widener II, George's surviving son from his marriage to Eleanor before Harry was born, will inherit. But Peter II is pragmatic, not sentimental. He won't maintain Lynnewood Hall as a private gallery. Joseph begins thinking long-term, 30 years long-term. The art must be protected. That's non-negotiable. But maybe, probably, it can't stay at Lynnewood forever. The idea begins to form. Eventual donation to a museum, a major museum, somewhere the collection will be preserved, studied, and shared. Joseph doesn't announce this plan. He simply holds it, a seed waiting for the right season. Through the late 19-teens and into the 1920s, Lynnewood Hall endures. The house is maintained. The art is protected. Public visits continue, October through June, by appointment, free of charge. Art students sketch in the galleries. Scholars study the Rembrandts. Citizens from Philadelphia and beyond experience masterworks without traveling to Europe. Joseph lives quietly. He never marries. Art is his passion, his vocation, his life. He travels regularly to Europe when war allows, hunting for additions to the collection. He works with the Duveen brothers, now led by Joseph Duveen, the younger, the most powerful art dealer of the era. The collection grows, not dramatically, space and resources are limited, but selectively. Every addition is justified by quality. Joseph is a purist. He'd rather have 10 perfect paintings than 100 good ones. By 1929, Lynnewood Hall has survived 14 years without Peter. The house is stable. The collection is intact. Joseph feels cautiously optimistic. Then October comes. The stock market crashes, and Lynnewood Hall faces its next existential test.
Washington, D.C., early 1942. The National Gallery of Art has a problem. The museum opened just months before Pearl Harbor. Its collection, Mellon's donation, plus works from Samuel Kress and others, includes priceless paintings and sculpture, masterworks by European and American artists, cultural treasures that define Western civilization. And they're sitting in Washington, D.C., capital city, potential target. After Pearl Harbor, fear is rational. If Japan could strike Hawaii, what stops Germany from bombing American cities? The Atlantic is wide, but bombers are improving. Coastal cities, New York, Boston, Washington, might be vulnerable. Even if invasion or bombing seems unlikely, sabotage doesn't. Spies operate in America. Sympathizers exist. A determined enemy could infiltrate the capital and destroy the gallery's holdings with fire or explosives. The gallery's trustees meet. The question, how do we protect the collection? Keeping everything in Washington is too risky, but moving it where? Requirements are specific. Inland location, far from coasts and likely targets. Secure, isolated, controllable access. Climate-controlled, paintings and textiles require stable temperature and humidity. Large, the collection includes hundreds of works, many oversized. Discreet, the access can't be public knowledge. Operational security demands secrecy. Someone suggests Lynnewood Hall. Lynnewood checks every box. Location, Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. Suburban Philadelphia. Inland, not a strategic target. Security, private estate behind gates. Single approach road, easy to monitor, isolated from public traffic. Climate, central heating. Lynnewood systems, installed in the 1890s and updated over decades, can maintain stable temperature and humidity, essential for art preservation. Space, 110 rooms, including large first-floor galleries and oversized bedrooms. High ceilings. Rooms can accommodate substantial crated paintings and sculpture. Discretion. Lynnewood isn't a public building. Staff is minimal and trusted. The estate can be secured without drawing attention. And crucially, Joseph Early Widener agrees. Joseph is approached by gallery officials in early 1942. The request is delicate. Can Lynnewood Hall store the National Gallery's most important works for the duration of the war? Joseph doesn't hesitate. Yes, this is exactly the kind of service he believes wealth should provide. His house, built to showcase art, can now protect it. The irony is elegant. Art that will eventually leave Lynnewood is temporarily sheltered there. Arrangements are made quietly. The gallery identifies which works to move. Priority goes to the most valuable and irreplaceable, old masters, rare sculpture, iconic pieces. In spring 1942, the transfers begin. Trucks arrive at the National Gallery after dark. Guards supervise. Each work is carefully crated, custom boxes built to precise measurements, padded with archival materials. Paintings are secured so they won't shift in transit. Fragile frames are protected. Sculpture is cushioned.
Crates are labeled with numbers, not titles. If a truck is intercepted, thieves won't know what they have. Convoys drive from Washington to Philadelphia at night, headlights dimmed where regulations allow. Armed guards accompany each truck. The route is varied, never the same roads twice to avoid predictability. At Lynnewood Hall, trucks enter through the gates and drive directly to service entrances. Crates are unloaded and carried inside. Guards supervise every step. Certain rooms are designated as storage, primarily the music room, first floor, large, climate-stable, minimal windows, several upstairs bedrooms, spacious, controllable temperature, low public visibility. Crates are stacked methodically. Records are kept. Which crate contains which work, where it's stored. Climate is monitored daily. Temperature and humidity logs are maintained. The works stored at Lynnewood Hall include, based on historical records, though exact inventories remain partially classified, Rembrandt paintings, Raphael panels, Vermeer's rare works, Gilbert Stuart's iconic portrait of George Washington, the image on the $1 bill, sculpture by Donatello and other Renaissance masters, dozens of other masterworks. The total value is incalculable, tens of millions even in 1940s dollars. Today, hundreds of millions, possibly over $1 billion. All sitting in darkened rooms in a Pennsylvania mansion. Security at Lynnewood Hall intensifies. Federal guards are assigned. They dress in civilian clothes to avoid attracting attention. Patrols run the clock. Perimeters are checked. Windows are watched. Joseph continues living in the house. Life goes on, just more quietly. Staff knows something important is stored, but aren't told specifics. Curiosity is natural, but security culture prevails. No one asks. No one discusses. The war rages overseas. North Africa, Italy, France, the Pacific Islands. Casualties mount. Victory seems distant. At Lynnewood Hall, the art sits in darkness. Occasionally, National Gallery representatives visit. They inspect conditions, check temperature and humidity logs, verify that crates remain undisturbed. Satisfied, they leave. The arrangement continues through 1942, 1943, 1944. In Europe, Allied forces advance. D-Day, June 6, 1944, launches the liberation of France. By August, Paris is free. By fall, Allied armies push toward Germany. In the Pacific, island-hopping campaigns bring American forces closer to Japan. Victory is coming, slowly, bloodily, but coming. By early 1945, it's clear the war will end. Germany collapses in May. Japan surrenders in August after atomic bombs devastate Hiroshima and Nagasaki. World War II is over. The National Gallery begins retrieval. Fall 1945. Trucks return to Lynnewood Hall. Crates are carefully loaded. Each work is accounted for. Nothing is missing, nothing is damaged. The art returns to Washington. Crates are opened, works are inspected. Restoration teams check for any deterioration. There is none. Lynnewood's climate control held. The paintings are reframed and rehung. Sculpture is reinstalled. Within months, the National Gallery reopens fully to the public. Lynnewood Hall's service is acknowledged quietly. Official records note the storage arrangement. Joseph receives thanks from gallery trustees and government officials, but there's no public celebration. Operational security, even after the war, means details remain classified for years. Joseph doesn't seek recognition. He provided what was needed. That's enough. But the experience reinforces something Joseph has known for years. Lynnewood Hall can serve. As residents, it's magnificent but impractical, expensive, difficult to maintain. As museum, it's problematic, too far from population centers, too small for major exhibitions, too expensive to operate as public institution. But as protector, temporary guardian of beauty during crisis, it's perfect. And Joseph realizes that's Lynnewood's future, not as home, not as gallery, but as gift. The house has served by sheltering art during war. Soon it will serve by giving that art away permanently. Joseph is 72 years old in 1943. His health is declining, not dramatically, but noticeably. Doctors warn him to slow down. He ignores them. There's work to finish. His will is updated one final time. Every detail is specified. The Widener collection goes to the National Gallery. Instructions are clear. Inventory complete. Joseph Early Widener dies on October 26, 1943, exactly where his father died, at Lynnewood Hall, surrounded by art he loved, paintings by masters, sculpture by geniuses, beauty that outlasted him. The will is read. The terms are executed. The National Gallery receives over 2,000 works, paintings, sculpture, furniture, ceramics, textiles, one of the largest single donations in art history.
The crating begins again. This time, it's permanent. Lynnewood's galleries are emptied. Walls that held Rembrandts for 4 decades go bare. Pedestals that supported Donatello bronzes stand empty. Trucks carry the collection to Washington, one final convoy. The art that defined Lynnewood Hall leaves for the last time. By early 1944, it's done. Lynnewood Hall is empty. The house remains, the structure endures, but the purpose, the reason Peter built it, the reason Joseph maintained it, is gone. What remains is shell, beautiful shell, limestone and marble, carved wood and Tiffany glass, architecture that testified to Gilded Age ambition. But a house without art is just rooms, and rooms without people are just space. Peter A.B. Widener II, Joseph's nephew, George's surviving son, inherits the estate. Peter II is a writer, a thinker. He authored Without Drums, a memoir about growing up Widener. In it, he writes, "The days of America's privately owned treasure houses are over. They are gone with the wind. Lynnewood Hall can, I suppose, be called the last of the American Versailles." Peter II understands that Lynnewood's era has passed. The Gilded Age is history. The fortunes that built these houses have been taxed, subdivided, dissipated. The cultural moment that celebrated private palaces has shifted toward democratic institutions. Museums, not mansions, are the future. Peter II doesn't try to maintain Lynnewood as his uncle did. He can't, and frankly, he doesn't want to. He lives there briefly, then moves elsewhere. The house sits, maintained minimally, staff reduced to skeleton crew, rooms closed, heat turned off except where necessary to prevent pipe damage. Lynnewood Hall enters its long decline. Not dramatic collapse, not sudden ruin, just slow, quiet fading, the kind of death that takes decades. Elkins Park, 1950s. Lynnewood Hall still stands, but barely lives. Peter A.B. Widener II retains ownership, but doesn't reside there. The house is too large, too expensive, too impractical for a single family in the mid-20th century. He could sell, except who's buying? The market for Gilded Age mansions is dead, completely dead. In the 1950s, America is booming economically, but culturally, the country has moved on. The post-war ethos favors suburban ranch houses, modern design, efficient living, not 110-room French chateau requiring armies of servants. The math is simple and brutal. Lynnewood Hall costs roughly $100,000 annually to operate, over $1 million today.
That covers property taxes, substantial, utilities. Heating a house this size is phenomenally expensive. Insurance, especially with theft risk, maintenance, roofs leak, pipes burst, systems fail, and minimal staff, at least a few caretakers, groundskeepers, security. Revenue? Zero. The art that attracted visitors is gone. The house as tourist attraction doesn't work. It's not historically significant like Mount Vernon, not architecturally unique enough to draw crowds, and not accessible for large groups. The house bleeds money with no way to stop the bleeding. Peter II maintains it minimally. Essential systems are kept functional, property taxes are paid, but that's all. Rooms are closed, dust accumulates, the gardens overgrow. By the 1960s, Lynnewood looks tired. This story isn't unique. Across America, Gilded Age mansions face the same crisis. Newport, Rhode Island, the Breakers, Marble House, Rosecliff. These houses survive because the Preservation Society of Newport County takes them over, operates them as museums, charges admission. Tourism saves them. New York, Fifth Avenue mansions are demolished by the dozen. The Vanderbilt houses, Astor houses, Carnegie Mansion, now Cooper Hewitt Museum. Most are torn down for high-rises and office buildings. Land is too valuable to waste on single-family homes. Long Island, Gold Coast estates disappear. Some become schools or country clubs. Many are demolished. F. Scott Fitzgerald's world of Gatsby literally vanishes. Pennsylvania, White Marsh Hall, another Horace Trambauer masterpiece, larger even than Lynnewood, is demolished in 1980. The cost of preservation exceeds anyone's willingness to pay. The pattern is consistent. These houses were built in an era of cheap labor, minimal taxes, and concentrated wealth. By mid-century, all three conditions no longer exist. Labor is expensive. Federal minimum wage, unions, and labor protections mean you can't pay servants poverty wages. Taxes are heavy. Income taxes, estate taxes, property taxes, all introduced or raised in the 20th century, eat into fortunes that once seemed infinite. Wealth is dispersed. Inheritance laws, economic changes, and family proliferation mean Gilded Age fortunes are divided among dozens or hundreds of heirs. No single heir has resources to maintain the ancestral pile. Result? Abandonment, demolition, or conversion. Lynnewood Hall enters the 1970s in limbo. Peter A.B. Widener II dies in 1948. The estate passes to other family members, then to investors. Ownership changes hands multiple times. Each owner faces the same reality. The house is unsellable as residence, unprofitable as business, and too expensive to maintain as anything. Proposals circulate. Convert to a hotel? Too expensive to retrofit. Not enough parking. Location doesn't support luxury hotel market. School or university? Possible, but renovations would cost millions. Liability and code compliance issues. Museum? Who pays operating costs? Admission wouldn't cover expenses. Government funding? Unlikely without major historical significance. Apartments? Conversion would destroy historic fabric. Also, who wants to live in a carved-up mansion? Demolition and redevelopment? Land value doesn't justify demolition costs. The site is large, but not prime commercial real estate. Every option fails economics. So, Lynnewood sits. By the 1980s, the house is decaying. The copper roof, over 80 years old, develops leaks. Water enters. Plaster softens and falls. Ceilings collapse in unused rooms. Windows break. Weather gets in. Pigeons roost in the ballroom. Their droppings acidify floors and corrode finishes. Vandals break in. Copper wiring is stripped for scrap value. Marble mantels are stolen. Light fixtures disappear. Anything portable and valuable is taken. The gardens are wilderness. Jacques Griber's formal French design is obliterated. Fountains, sculpted by Henry Léon Gribert, once masterpieces, are dry, cracked, stained. The house that opened in 1899 with electric light, central heating, and masterworks on every wall now feels like a tomb. Local preservationists rally. The Elkins Park community values Lynnewood's history. Efforts are made to designate it a historic landmark, which would provide some protection and potentially unlock funding. In 1989, Lynnewood Hall is added to the National Register of Historic Places. This is symbolic but helpful. It acknowledges significance and can facilitate grants or tax incentives for restoration. But designation doesn't fund restoration. Lynnewood needs millions, tens of millions, to stabilize, repair, and restore. No one has that money, or more accurately, no one with that money wants to spend it on Lynnewood. Through the 1990s and 2000s, the house continues deteriorating. More ceilings fall, more windows break, more water infiltrates, mold blooms, rot spreads through wooden elements. The structure itself, Trambauer's steel and limestone, remains sound. The house isn't collapsing, but the finishes are dying, and once finishes are gone, restoration becomes exponentially more difficult and expensive. Occasional buyers appear, none follow through. Due diligence reveals the scope of necessary work. Estimates climb, 20 million, 30 million, 50 million, potentially more depending on intended use and code requirements. The return on investment? Unclear, probably negative. Lynnewood Hall becomes a case study in preservation economics. Just because a building is historically significant and architecturally important doesn't mean it's financially viable. And without financial viability, preservation is charity, expensive charity. In 2014, a group called the Lynnewood Hall Project forms. Dedicated preservationists, architects, historians, fundraisers. Their goal, save the house. They document conditions. They create architectural surveys. They develop restoration plans. They reach out to potential donors, foundations, government agencies. Progress is slow. Fundraising is difficult. The house isn't nationally famous like Hearst Castle or Biltmore. It's regional, niche. Most Americans have never heard of it. The project persists. They secure some grants. They fund emergency stabilization, tarps on the worst roof sections, bracing for fragile ceilings. But comprehensive restoration remains out of reach. As of 2024, Lynnewood Hall stands, barely. The exterior looks relatively intact from a distance. The limestone is stained but solid. The roof has patches and missing slates but hasn't totally failed. Inside is a different story. Plaster fallen in heaps, carved wood warped and rotting, marble cracked, ballroom ceiling partially collapsed, music room damaged, bedrooms stripped of fixtures. The Tiffany skylight in the tea room is gone, stolen years ago. The grand staircase endures, though battered. The balustrades are damaged, marble treads are cracked, but the bones are there. Walk through Lynnewood today, if you could gain access, which is difficult, and you'd see both tragedy and stubbornness. Tragedy, beauty destroyed by neglect. Craftsmanship that took years to create, ruined in decades. Stubbornness, the house refuses to fall. Trambauer built too well. The structure resists. The limestone doesn't crumble. The steel doesn't buckle. The foundations hold. Lynnewood Hall is like a boxer in the 12th round, bloodied and beaten, but still standing. The question is, how long? Every winter, freeze-thaw cycles worsen damage. Every storm, water intrudes deeper. Every year without intervention, restoration becomes harder. Preservationists estimate that Lynnewood has maybe a decade before damage becomes irreversible. After that, even unlimited money can't save it. The house will be too far gone. Some argue, let it go. America has other Gilded Age houses, better preserved, better accessible. Why pour millions into one more mansion when those millions could fund schools, hospitals, housing? Others counter. Lynnewood is irreplaceable. The craftsmanship can't be recreated. The scale is extraordinary. The history, Peter, Joseph, George, Harry, Titanic, the National Gallery, is American history. Losing it is losing part of our story. Both sides are right, which is why Lynnewood's fate remains uncertain. The house built to last centuries might not see its 150th birthday. And if it falls, the question becomes, what did it all mean? Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. Present day. Drive past Lynnewood Hall and you might not notice it. Trees obscure the view. Gates are closed. The house sits back from the road, hidden, forgotten by most. But if you know where to look, if you stop, peer through the gates, you'll see it. Indiana limestone, gray-brown with age and staining, steep roof lines, corner towers, tall windows, many broken, some boarded. From this distance, Lynnewood still looks grand, imposing, a chateau that refuses to apologize for its scale. Get closer, hypothetically, because access is restricted, and the damage becomes apparent. The copper roof, installed in 1899, patinated beautifully for decades, that signature blue-green. Now it's patched with modern materials. Slates are missing, valleys leak, flashings have failed, water intrusion is chronic. The Indiana limestone exterior is stained, black streaks where water runs, green algae in damp areas, biological growth in joints. The stone itself is sound. Indiana limestone is incredibly durable, but it looks tired. Windows are the weak point. Many are broken. Some are boarded with plywood, crude repairs that clash with the original elegance. Where glass remains, it's often cracked or missing panes. Weather enters freely. The bronze doors, Florentine bronze, installed in 1899, weighing hundreds of pounds, are still there. Tarnished, dented in places, but there, a testament to quality. Thieves couldn't carry them. Step inside, again hypothetically, and you enter a world frozen in decay. The main hall. Cane stone walls rise 3 stories. Marble floors, once polished, are cracked and stained. Plaster has fallen from the ceiling in sections, revealing lath underneath. Debris, chunks of plaster, broken wood, detritus, covers the floor. Pigeons roost in the upper reaches. Their droppings coat everything. The smell is acrid. Look up. The barrel-vaulted ceiling that once displayed painted detail is damaged. Water stains map where leaks have run. Some carved elements remain intact. Others have fallen. The grand staircase, still there, still magnificent in bones. The wide treads, the carved balustrades, the spatial drama of ascending 3 stories. But the marble is cracked. Sections of balustrade are broken. Dust and grime coat every surface. Stand on that staircase and imagine 1899, opening night, guests in evening dress ascending, electric light glowing, music playing, the house alive with purpose. Now it's silence, broken only by wind through broken windows and the flutter of pigeon wings. The ballroom, 30-foot ceilings, or they were. Parts of the ceiling have collapsed. Plaster and lath lie in piles. The floor, once inlaid hardwood in geometric patterns, is warped from water damage. The chandeliers are gone, stolen, light fixtures ripped out, wiring dangling. But the proportions remain. Stand in the center and the scale still impresses. You can feel what this room was meant to be, a space for celebration, for gathering, for music and dancing. The library, floor-to-ceiling bookcases, empty. The books, thousands of them, were dispersed decades ago, some to institutions, some sold. The shelves remain, carved oak, though damaged. The fireplace surround, carved stone, is intact. The rolling ladders are gone. This was Peter's room, where he sat and read, where he studied art catalogs and planned acquisitions, where he received the telegram about Titanic. Now it's just empty space. The galleries, two large rooms designed specifically to showcase art, skylights above, now covered or broken. Walls once covered in fabric, now exposed plaster, much of it fallen. The rooms echo. These walls held Rembrandt, Raphael, Titian, Vermeer, the greatest paintings private hands could acquire, art worth hundreds of millions today. Now the walls hold nothing but shadows. The tea room, the Tiffany skylight is gone. Stolen sometime in the 1990s, cut out and removed. What remains is a hole, crudely patched. The room below is damaged by exposure. The exquisite proportions are still evident, but the jewel is gone. Conservatory, the glass roof has failed in sections. Plants that once thrived here are long dead. The space is rubble and ruin. Bedrooms upstairs, dozens of them. Peter and Josephine's suite, George and Eleanor's rooms, Harry's room, guest rooms. Most are stripped, fixtures removed, carved woodwork damaged or stolen, bathrooms vandalized, porcelain smashed, pipes pulled. But details remain. A carved mantel here, a section of intact plaster there, fragments of what was. Servants' quarters on upper floors, simpler but still built solidly. These rooms, never fancy, fare slightly better. Less damage because less valuable. No one steals plain woodwork. Service corridors, narrow passages behind the main rooms. Staff used these to move unseen. Painted institutional green, likely. Now dark, damp passages lined with fallen plaster and debris. Basement, the boiler rooms, massive spaces designed to hold industrial-scale heating equipment. The original boilers are gone, salvaged for scrap or simply removed when they failed. The rooms are empty, stone walls weeping moisture, puddles on floors, rust stains everywhere. This is where the house's machinery lived, the systems that made 110 rooms comfortable. Central heating in 1899 was extraordinary, cutting-edge technology. Now it's archaeological curiosity. Outside, the grounds tell their own story. 33 acres once manicured to perfection. William Kleinheinz's original landscaping, Jacques Griber's French formal gardens, fountains by Henri-Léon Gribert, lawns like carpets, specimen trees placed for maximum effect. Now overgrown. Trees planted in 1899 are massive, untended, some dead or dying. Lawns are waist-high grass and weeds. Garden beds are indistinguishable from surrounding wilderness. The fountains, those sculptures by a master, are dry, cracked, stained with algae and mineral deposits. Some basins have trees growing from them. Nature reclaims what humans abandoned. Outbuildings, garages, greenhouses, workshops, all in similar condition, roofs failing, windows broken, interiors gutted. Stand in the gardens, or what's left, and look back at the house. From here, at a distance, squint slightly, and you can almost see it. Lynnewood Hall in 1899, Pristine, electric lights glowing from within, gardens perfect, carriages approaching. But blink, and it's gone, replaced by reality. The house as it is, wounded, dying, stubborn. What would Peter think? He built this to last forever, to house art, to serve the public, to stand as a monument to what ambition and discipline could achieve. It lasted 125 years, longer than most Gilded Age houses, but not forever. What would Joseph think? He fought to save it, cut costs, reduced staff, donated the art to ensure its survival. He kept Lynnewood functioning through the Depression and war. Would he be angry at the current state? Or would he understand? The art survived. That was always the priority. The house was just the container. What would Harry and George think? They never saw Lynnewood's decline. They died in 1912 when the house was still young, still vibrant. Maybe that's a mercy. Or maybe they'd see the poetry. Beauty is temporary. Life is fragile. Even great houses fall. What remains at Lynnewood today is a question mark. The structure is salvageable. Engineers confirm the steel skeleton is sound, the limestone is solid, foundation hasn't failed, the house can be saved. But should it? And if yes, who pays? Estimates for comprehensive restoration, 50 million minimum, possibly 75 million, maybe 100 million, depending on intended use. That's not preservation, that's resurrection. For comparison, that money could build a new hospital, fund a university scholarship program for decades, house hundreds of homeless families. Against that, what's the value of one Gilded Age mansion? Preservationists argue cultural heritage, architectural significance, historical testimony. These things matter. Not everything is about dollars and immediate utility. Opponents argue resource allocation, practical impact.
Practical impact, present needs over past glories. Both are right. Which is why Lynnewood sits in limbo. Too important to demolish, too expensive to save. Meanwhile, every year, more damage accumulates. Preservation professionals have a term, demolition by neglect, when a building isn't actively torn down, but isn't maintained either. It's allowed to decay until preservation becomes impossible. Then demolition becomes inevitable. Lynnewood is in that territory, not yet past the point of no return, but approaching it. A few more winters, a few more storms, a few more years of water intrusion and freeze-thaw cycles. Then the decision makes itself. The question is, will anyone act before it's too late? Or will Lynnewood Hall join the long list of Gilded Age casualties, houses that once defined American achievement, now reduced to photographs and memories? The house is fighting. It's still standing, still refusing to fall. But even the strongest fighter can only take so many blows. And time, unlike human opponents, never gets tired. So here we are, end of the investigation. Time to answer the questions we've been circling for a long time. Who paid for Lynnewood Hall? And what did it cost? Start with the obvious answer. Peter A.B. Widener paid. Millions of dollars, 1890s money. Probably $5 to $10 million for construction, furnishings, landscaping. Over $150 million in today's currency, maybe more. He paid in cash, drawn from a fortune built on streetcars, utilities, and ruthless business acumen. That's the simple answer, but it's incomplete. The men who built Lynnewood paid. Stonemasons, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, laborers, hundreds of them. 2 years of their lives, 6-day weeks, 10-hour days, stone dust in their lungs, heights without safety equipment, winter cold, summer heat. They were paid wages. Skilled craftsmen earned decent money for the era, but the physical cost was theirs. Bodies worn down, injuries.
Some didn't finish the project. Illness, accident, death. The records don't detail casualties, but in construction of this scale, casualties were inevitable. Their names are in archived payroll ledgers, mostly forgotten. The staff paid. Lynnewood required over 100 people at peak operation: maids, footmen, cooks, laundresses, groundskeepers, engineers, security. They worked long hours for modest wages. Their labor made the house function. Without them, Lynnewood was just empty rooms. They weren't enslaved. This was 1899, not 1799. They were paid, but the labor was exhausting, endless, often invisible. Fires lit before dawn, meals prepared on schedule, rooms cleaned daily, gardens maintained regardless of weather. Their reward: wages, housing, stability. In return, they gave their time, energy, and anonymity. Guests noticed the house, not the hands that maintained it. George and Harry paid, with their lives, on a ship Peter's company partially owned, seeking a chef for a restaurant they owned, pursuing books and business and family obligations. They drowned in April 1912 because they were wealthy enough to book first-class passage on Titanic and unlucky enough to be men when lifeboats were loaded. Their deaths broke Peter. He lived 3 more years, but the man who built Lynnewood died the night Titanic sank. What continued was just biological process. Peter paid again, in grief. He'd spent decades accumulating wealth, acquiring art, building an empire, and learned the brutal lesson: money can't protect what you love. All the Indiana limestone, all the Rembrandts, all the power and influence in America couldn't buy 2 more lifeboats. Eleanor paid, George's widow. She survived Titanic and lived another 25 years. She remarried, funded libraries, including Harvard's Widener Memorial Library in Harry's name. But she carried the survivor's burden. Why did I live when they died? She sat in that lifeboat and watched Titanic sink, knowing her husband and son were aboard. That's a cost that doesn't appear in financial ledgers. Joseph paid, not with his life, but with his life's work. He spent decades maintaining Lynnewood, protecting the art, cutting costs, fighting to keep Peter's vision alive. He succeeded. The art survived, eventually donated to the National Gallery. But Joseph never married, no children. His life was Lynnewood and the collection. When he died in 1943, he'd preserved what mattered most to Peter, but he'd sacrificed personal fulfillment. Was it worth it? Joseph apparently thought so, but we'll never know what he might have done if Lynnewood hadn't consumed his life. The wider community paid in unexpected ways. Lynnewood supported hundreds of families, workers, suppliers, service providers. When the Depression hit, Joseph's cost-cutting meant layoffs. People lost jobs, income, security. The house gave, then took away. And now the present pays. Every year Lynnewood sits abandoned is a year of lost heritage. The craftsmanship can't be replicated. The techniques, Italian stone carving, French plasterwork, are dying arts. Once Lynnewood falls, that knowledge is harder to access. We lose not just a building, but a textbook. Architecture students could learn from Lynnewood, preservationists could study its systems, historians could interpret its story. Instead, it decays. So who paid? Everyone, each in their own currency. Peter, dollars and grief. Workers, sweat and health. Staff, time and labor. George and Harry, their lives. Eleanor, survivor's guilt. Joseph, personal sacrifice. The public, lost heritage. Now the second question: what did it cost? Again, start simple. Construction cost millions. Operating costs were hundreds of thousands annually. Over Lynnewood's active lifespan, roughly 1899 to 1945, the total expenditure was probably $20 to $30 million in period dollars. Call it $500 million to $1 billion today. That's just financial. The real cost is harder to quantify. Cost in human terms? How do you price the stonemason's silicosis from breathing stone dust? The maid's chronic back pain from lifting and scrubbing, the cook's burns from industrial stoves. These people traded health for wages. Was it fair exchange? Depends who you ask. For some, Lynnewood jobs were opportunity, steady work, decent pay, housing included, better than alternatives. For others, it was exploitation. Long hours, hard work, limited advancement, all to maintain luxury they'd never enjoy. Both perspectives are valid. Economic relationships are rarely purely exploitative or purely beneficial. Usually they're mixed. Cost in opportunity? Every dollar spent on Lynnewood was a dollar not spent elsewhere. Peter funded hospitals, schools, libraries, significant philanthropy. But imagine if the $5 million spent building Lynnewood had gone entirely to public goods. How many schools? How many hospital beds? How much scholarship funding? We can't know, but the question is worth asking. Counter-argument? Peter's business activities created wealth that funded both Lynnewood and philanthropy. Without his ruthlessness in streetcar consolidation, neither the house nor the charitable work happens. You don't get the good without the hard edge that created the fortune. Cost in artistic terms was consolidating 2,000-plus masterworks in a private home accessible only by appointment the best use of those works? Joseph argued temporary stewardship. The Wideners protected and shared the art, then donated it, net positive. Others might argue those works should have been in museums from the start, accessible to everyone, not decorating a private house. Again, both views are merited. Cost in cultural terms? Lynnewood represents Gilded Age excess, a time when wealth inequality reached extremes, when robber barons built palaces while workers lived in tenements. Should we celebrate that or critique it? Maybe both. Celebrate the craftsmanship and artistic vision. Critique the economic system that enabled it. History is complex. Simplifying it doesn't serve truth. Cost in environmental terms? Building Lynnewood consumed massive resources. Limestone quarried in Indiana, marble from 6 countries, timber, coal, steel. Shipping all required energy, trains, ships, wagons. Operating it consumed more, coal by the ton, electricity, water. Heating 110 rooms through Pennsylvania winters is environmentally expensive. By modern standards, Lynnewood was a carbon nightmare. By 1899 standards, it was just how rich people lived. Context matters. Final cost, the one we're watching now, cultural loss. If Lynnewood falls, we lose a tangible connection to the Gilded Age. We lose a building that tells a complete story, ambition, achievement, tragedy, resilience, decline. We lose craftsmanship that can't be replicated, skills that existed in 1899, stone carving, ornamental plaster, Tiffany glass, are rare or extinct today. We lose a teaching tool. Lynnewood could educate on architecture, history, economics, labor, art collecting, preservation challenges. Instead, it sits, decaying, potential unrealized. That's a cost we're paying right now, every day of inaction. So, who paid for Lynnewood Hall? Everyone who touched it, in cash, labor, time, health, or life. What did it cost? More than money can measure, less than beauty deserves. And the final question, the one that started this investigation, can beauty make you immortal if it slowly eats your
life? Look at Peter. He built Lynnewood to last forever. The art, the architecture, the vision, all designed for permanence. He's been dead 109 years, but his name endures. The Widener collection at the National Gallery is visited by millions. Scholars study his business methods. Historians analyze his impact. In that sense, yes, beauty made him immortal. But it ate his life, too. The final years after Titanic, he was hollowed out. Wealth couldn't comfort him. Art couldn't heal him. He built something that outlasted him, but at a cost he probably wouldn't have paid if he'd known. Would he do it again? We can't know. But Lynnewood stands, barely, as his answer. Complicated, magnificent, tragic, and unresolved. Just like the American dream itself.
Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. Today, Lynnewood Hall sits behind its gates, limestone stained, roof patched, windows broken, gardens wild. Still standing, barely, fighting against time, weather, and economics. The house that opened in 1999 with electric light and masterworks on every wall now holds only shadows and questions. Will anyone save it? Or will it join the long list of Gilded Age casualties, mansions demolished, forgotten, erased from everything but photographs? The answer depends on what we value. If we value heritage, craftsmanship, architectural testimony, historical connection, then Lynnewood matters. It's worth the millions required to stabilize, restore, repurpose. If we value practical impact, resource allocation, present needs over past glories, then Lynnewood is an expensive indulgence, millions better spent elsewhere. Both perspectives are rational, which means the decision is ultimately emotional, philosophical, cultural. What kind of society do we want to be? One that preserves its past, even imperfect past, because history teaches? Or one that moves forward pragmatically, letting the past fall when maintenance becomes burden? There's no objectively correct answer, but there are consequences to both choices. Save Lynnewood. We preserve craftsmanship, maintain connection to Gilded Age history, create educational opportunity, honor the workers and families whose labor built it. Let Lynnewood fall. We allocate resources to present needs, acknowledge that not everything can or should be saved, accept that some history exists only in records. The choice will be made, actively or passively, by decision or default. Lynnewood's clock is ticking. Preservationists say maybe 10 years before damage becomes irreversible, maybe less. Every winter worsens the situation. Someone needs to act. A philanthropist, a foundation, a government, a coalition. Or no one acts, and in a decade, Lynnewood Hall is rubble. Both futures are possible. This investigation can't decide which happens. That's beyond one video's power. But it can do this: tell the story, completely, honestly, with complexity intact. Lynnewood Hall is not just a house. It's a monument to ambition, a testament to craftsmanship, a memorial to Titanic victims, a repository for masterworks, a casualty of economics, a preservation challenge, a question about values. It's all of these, simultaneously, contradictorily, just like America itself. Peter A.B. Widener built Lynnewood from nothing, butcher's son to palace owner, the quintessential American story. George and Harry died pursuing that dream, lost to the Atlantic, victims of confidence in unsinkable engineering. Eleanor survived, but carried the weight. Joseph preserved what mattered most, the art, by giving it away. The house remains, wounded, stubborn, refusing to die quietly. What happens next is up to us, the living, the inheritors of this complicated legacy. Do we value what they built enough to save it? Or do we let it go, keeping only photographs and memories? There's no shame in either choice, just consequences. If you've stayed with this investigation for 90 minutes, you care about these questions, about history, preservation, cost, beauty, legacy. So here's my ask. Like this video if you found it valuable. Subscribe if you want more deep investigations into Gilded Age architecture and the families who built it. Tell me in the comments, should Lynnewood Hall be saved? And if yes, how? Who pays? What's the plan? Also, which mansion should we investigate next? The Breakers? Newport's Crown Jewel? Vanderbilt Spectacle? Whitemarsh Hall? Trumbauer's masterpiece? Demolished 1980. What was lost? Rose Terrace? Michigan's Vanished Palace? Art Deco Glory? Shadow Lawn? New Jersey Giant? Wilson's Summer White House? Or something unexpected? A forgotten house with a story waiting to be told? Your comments drive these investigations. Your engagement makes them possible. One final thought. Every mansion has its shadows. Every dream has its price. Lynnewood Hall's shadows are long, Titanic, depression, decline, the human cost of beauty. But there's light too, craftsmanship that endures, art that enriched millions, a family that gave back, a house that served, sheltering masterworks during war, housing memories, teaching lessons. The light and shadow exist together. Neither cancels the other. That's the complexity of history, of America, of human achievement. We build, we lose, we grieve. We preserve what we can. We let go of what we must. Lynnewood Hall teaches all of this. Whether it stands or falls, the lessons remain. Beauty is temporary. Life is fragile. Nothing lasts forever, except the questions we leave behind. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. I'll see you in the next investigation.